This is Arcachon Bay in the southwest of France. Here, oyster farmers cultivate one of the world's most sought-after delicacies.
We get to see how the shellfish develop. It's valuable and wonderful work.
The area is known as a holiday destination, but these locals have a grueling and risky job to do.
If you work 7 days a week without taking a day off, and you still can't make a living from this work, of course you eventually come to regret it.
Every day is a battle against nature, economic disaster, and the competition.
We've gone from 1,000 growers to 300 in 30 years. Unless things change, in 10 years there'll be 100.
Criminals also target the precious oysters.
When we catch an oyster thief, the court in Bordeaux is pretty strict.
In this business, everything seems to constantly hang in the balance. Jérôme Goussard belongs to the maritime police unit that oversees Arcachon Bay. He and his team patrol the bay regularly, especially at night, to prevent oyster theft.
The tide is going out now, let's say for about another hour and a half. And some of the oyster beds are now out of sight.
Catching the thieves is a real challenge. In good weather conditions, the police even use drones and helicopters to monitor the oyster beds out in the shallow bay.
We took some pictures with a thermal imaging camera. You can see the oyster farmers on the water at night, 3 people and their goods. And the hotspots behind them are the boat's cabin and engine. So we definitely have ways of working effectively at night.
Today, the police boat has poor visibility, which makes it a good opportunity for thieves. Jérôme and his team check everyone they pass on the water.
Good evening. You're going to Arcachon?
Yes.
Where have you just come from?
I was at Banque de Gand.
Did you see anyone else there?
Yes, one.
A fisherman?
Yeah.
He's a fisherman. Normally you don't see fishermen working in the early evening, so it's worth carrying out an inspection. That way we can check the cargo. It's fish, not oysters.
The man is no oyster thief, but the night is still young for Jérôme and his team. They'll keep patrolling until low tide. For oyster farmer Frédéric Simon, the day begins just after 5 a.m. It's market day, and he's preparing his goods. He drives to a market in nearby Bordeaux, a highly sought-after place for the oyster farmers to sell their produce.
We have around 300 kilos of oysters, several different categories. We harvested these oysters on Tuesday at our farm in Corbeil.
At this popular market, stalls are hard to come by. Many have been passed down through the generations. Frédéric sells his own oysters and also supplies some of his colleagues. Most of them he sells from his own stall. They're a fresh product with a limited shelf life. They need to sell. They're farmed in several parts of Arcachon Bay.
La différence, c'est l'endroit d'où elles viennent.
The difference is their place of origin. Here's Andernach, where we're based. Here's Arcachon Bay and Cap Ferret. Everything in the light blue baskets comes from the interior side of the entrance. Everything in the dark blue baskets comes from the Banc d'Argent, from the ocean side of the entrance to the bay. The difference is that the oysters from the Banc d'Argent are a little meatier and saltier.
I'll take a dozen.
Of number 2?
Yes, number 2. That's great. We'll take them with us on our trip tomorrow.
Where are you going?
To Spain.
Spain. I can't pack just a dozen oysters into a basket. It would work for 2 dozen.
Okay, fine.
Frédéric likes it when customers make a spontaneous purchase. But he also has a lot of regular customers. They're especially important.
Having
direct contact with the customers, the atmosphere of the market, talking to the other stallholders. It's a really fun part of the job. If a customer doesn't like my oysters, they tell me straight away. And vice versa. If someone likes my oysters, they tell me that too. It's great to get immediate feedback. That helps us to improve.
In Andernach-les-Bains, the shores of Arcachon Bay are teeming with oyster huts. Several of them belong to Axel Boudard. He sells his oysters here, ready to eat.
I started all by myself. I bought a small business in 2019. Back then we were very small and I was all alone.
The 31-year-old is a newcomer to the oyster business. He wants to shake things up, although his methods haven't gone down well with many of the local oyster growers. As a teenager, he did work as a shucker, or oyster opener, for traditional businesses. But now he's focusing on new ideas, especially presentation.
I spent 18 months developing the concept, doing renovations and implementing the project. Then we opened, and in our second season, things really exploded, thanks in part to the internet. We kept growing, taking over hut after hut.
Axel now has 7 employees. He runs a boutique specialty fish store in the town, as well as a restaurant with harbour views.
Imagine walking along the harbour and seeing little huts with just a table or 2. Then you see this, a big bustling hut, perfect for Instagram. People go in immediately.
The design aims to be modern and inviting.
Et voici, bon appétit. Bon appétit, monsieur. Merci beaucoup.
I love oysters. When I want some in Andernach, I come here.
Axel says today's customers want well-presented oysters. They don't want to open them themselves and eat them at home. And this way, the costly farming process can become profitable again.
Everything has to be perfect. The presentation, how the plate is arranged. When you walk into the room, you can tell that we really value the aesthetics. It's a very, very competitive market. You have to excel in all areas if you want to stand out.
Very few oyster huts in the town are as lavishly furnished as Axel's. That makes him an outsider. He says he feels misunderstood by his colleagues.
The big problem in our industry is that many people have rested on their laurels. Families have worked like this from generation to generation. We are the first generation to really establish ourselves, despite not coming from a family of oyster farmers. Some people have taken that badly. They find it hard to accept because they're sitting on a gold mine, but they haven't taken advantage of it.
Many oyster farmers here are not doing well financially. There are various reasons for that, and most have nothing to do with the farmers themselves. Above all, the industry is suffering from climate change and crime. In the middle of Arcachon Bay, there are endless oyster beds. The delicacies have become targets for thieves. Jérôme Goussard and his team are out on the water several times a week, especially in the peak season before Christmas. A few years ago, there was a major theft.
We'd never documented such a serious robbery before. It was the kind of theft we had always wanted to prevent. A young oyster farmer lost 7 tons of oysters. It was catastrophic. They were ready to be sold, about to go to market in time for the holidays. He took a loss of 40 or 45,000 euros.
The biggest theft in recent years.
Yes, that's exactly what we want to prevent.
The police weren't able to catch the perpetrators, and the loss almost ruined the young oyster farmer. To make sure it doesn't happen again, Jérôme and his colleague are once again carefully patrolling the oyster beds, looking out for anything unusual.
These thefts are often planned and well organised. The thieves come prepared. You need people to load that many oysters. You can't just steal hundreds of kilos of oysters in 10 minutes. It's important that we patrol regularly, day and night. It can help prevent thefts. It can be a deterrent.
The police patrols are an important way of supporting the oyster farmers in Arcachon Bay. Frédéric and his son Luca begin their working day with the first high tide.
Today we're mainly harvesting the medium to medium-large sizes. They're the ones that sell best during the holidays. I should probably get changed.
Do it.
Arcachon Bay looks especially idyllic today. Oysters have been farmed here for over 160 years. The oyster farmers work hard and always in harmony with the tides. At high tide, the bay fills with fresh seawater. At low tide, the water level drops, revealing the heart of this unique world. Philippe Beau feels at home on the water. He's now retired, but he still likes to go with Frédéric and Luca to the oyster beds that used to be his. His own children didn't want to continue the family business into the 5th generation, so he handed it over to the Simons, father and son. He's happy that the business will live on in their hands.
It's nice because we've known each other for so long. They come from 2 generations. And they're from here in Andernaux, like me. They like good oysters, which is important. And they're also hard and diligent workers, which means a lot to me. I'm really happy about it.
But most of these traditional businesses struggle to find new blood. Many young people move away from Arcachon Bay and take up other careers. Oyster farming is seen as too risky.
One of the challenges of this work is that sometimes there are big problems, like storms in winter. You have to love Arcachon Bay. You have to have stamina and courage. And you also shouldn't expect to become a billionaire by doing this.
Good water quality is crucial for the growth of the oysters because they soak up everything from their environment. They can filter up to 25 litres of water per day, but that also makes them susceptible to disease. Like all oyster farmers, Frédéric and Luca have to follow the tides when harvesting. Their boat can only leave the harbour at high tide. Then the tide has to recede just enough to expose the oyster beds so that the pair can remove each oyster bag from the hooks and take them back to shore by boat.
This is a very good location. We're in an area that in principle is protected from ship traffic, because they're not allowed to anchor anywhere in the area. That means that there's a wealth of marine plants here, which also attracts lots of animals. The natural equilibrium here is really very good.
Et un équilibre naturel qui est vraiment très bon.
It's a job that requires patience, perseverance, and a respect for nature. For Luca and Frédéric, the oyster is more than just a product. It's their passion. They feel a connection to the traditions of the region and want to carry on Philippe's business in the same spirit he had. There are still a lot of steps to complete between harvesting and selling, but first it's back to the harbour. Axel isn't working in his restaurant this morning. He's come to his seafood delicatessen in the centre of Andernaux-les-Bains. He's sorting out staff rosters and customer orders. In addition to oysters, he also sells wild prawns from Africa, salmon and scallops.
If we only sold oysters, it would be very difficult. We couldn't have as many staff and we couldn't grow as much.
Turnover is important to Axel. He also has debts from loans he had to take out to buy the oyster business.
When I bought it, we made less than 100,000 euros in turnover. Now we make well over $1 million. So it's increased 10 to 15-fold.
Especially at Christmas time, numerous orders come in every day. Axel and his assistant, Chloé Courtelon, have a lot to do.
The pressure from competition is growing. You can't rest on your laurels.
Most of the local oyster farmers are still struggling to recover from the trade they lost during a disastrous incident in 2023. Luca and Frédéric show us news reports from back then.
It couldn't have come at a worse time. Just before New Year, the sale of oysters from Arcachon Bay has been banned after several cases of food poisoning. But it's clearly a big blow for oyster growers, who sell almost a quarter of their produce at this time of year.
In late 2023, heavy rainfall pushed the sewage treatment plants, which were already under strain because of tourism, to their limits. Wastewater was discharged into Arcachon Bay. The level of pollutants in the seawater rose so much that local authorities halted the sale of oysters. And it happened during the holiday season, a peak time for oyster sales throughout France. It was a disaster for Luca and Frédéric, especially because their business relies solely on the direct sale of oysters.
Last year was tough. Hopefully we won't go through that again.
Climate change is also a threat. Water temperatures in Arcachon Bay continue to rise, which increases the mortality rate of the oysters. It's a big economic challenge for the growers. Luca and Frédéric want politicians to come up with intelligent ways to regulate the growing tourism industry and to tackle the challenges of climate change. They haven't turned a profit from oyster production for 3 years due to the Christmas 2023 crisis and other setbacks, but they still love what they do.
This part of the job is a bit exhausting. When you do it all day, it feels more like work than pleasure. But once we have the product, and if the crop turns out nicely, then it starts to be enjoyable.
After harvesting, the oysters are stored in large basins and rinsed.
Over there are our oyster bags, which we got from the oyster farm last week. Now we're going to sort everything. We put it all in the big container over there. The conveyor belt brings the oysters to us, then we remove the empty shells and sort the rest by size.
Luca and Frédéric use special knives to remove mud, algae and other impurities. It's hard work for little profit. Because even though oysters are associated with luxury, they start out as a cheap product. Locally, the shellfish don't cost much. It's only in big cities and other countries that oysters become expensive. But local growers don't see any of those profits. Lucas says the oyster farming community should stick together.
It's all about where you are and how you treat your neighbours. We're lucky to be surrounded by friendly people. It's very harmonious.
Many of the long-established oyster farmers exchange ideas, share equipment and join forces to tackle problems. One such problem is theft, not only out on the water, where the oyster beds are, but also on shore.
2 years in a row, we've seen several break-ins at the oyster huts in the harbour over Christmas. They broke into I don't know how many huts in several harbours on the same night. So we had to install surveillance cameras that record continuously.
Meanwhile, Jérôme and his team are once again protecting the oyster farms themselves, this time early in the morning.
We have a register of all the oyster growers in Arcachon Bay, and we actually identify the oyster growers who are working. We try to record details that could be relevant in the event that there's a theft and a potential prosecution.
It's become clear that it's often oyster farmers themselves who steal from colleagues during harvest time. The quantities are often large enough to jeopardize a farmer's financial survival. The thieves not only harvest oyster bags from their own beds, but also from those of their neighbours. Sometimes several tons are taken unlawfully.
An oyster takes 3 years to grow, so it's a disaster for the farmers. We have to prevent these thefts. Add to that the fact that things are bad this year, the economic situation is bad, demand is decreasing, so theft would really be a problem.
Olivier, stop!
We already checked this gentleman 2 weeks ago. Now we're checking him again. Sometimes we do check the same oyster farmer several times. His boat is full. In this case, we know that he's following the rules. But it's also a good opportunity to talk to him about his goods, about particular problems, like the mortality rate of the oysters.
That affects lots of us.
Yes.
Experience has shown that theft among oyster farmers is more likely to be caused by hardship than by greed. Those in financial difficulties may steal from their colleagues in order to keep their own business afloat.
When the oyster's mortality rate is high, theft also goes up. Some oyster farmers need more live oysters to fill their customers' orders, so they try to steal them. We also hear that some oyster farmers are not often out by the oyster banks and yet still sell a lot. That's cause for speculation. People want to know where those oysters came from.
Whether done out of necessity or greed, these thefts are a crime. The courts in nearby Bordeaux treat oyster thieves harshly, often handing out heavy fines. In order to give their business some financial stability and prospects for the future, Frédéric and his son Luca are planning to open a restaurant of their own, right here in the harbour.
These are the typical huts that oyster farmers have. We want to take our company to the next level, using the huts we're going to right now.
The hut used to belong to a fisherman who's now retiring. There's no one to carry on his family business. Local fish used to be served here. Soon, Luca and Frédéric will be offering up freshly harvested oysters.
It's a great opportunity to spread our sales over the whole year and be less reliant on the Christmas period than we are right now. Above all, we want a business that's busy in spring and summer, as well as at Christmas.
d'infrastructure. Et puis on valorise l'entreprise. En termes de positionnement.
This location and this view, it's like paradise.
C'est juste le paradis.
Each year, on a Saturday before Christmas, Arcachon Bay plays host to the highlight of the oyster season. The Cabane en Fête is a big harbour festival put on by the local oyster farmers. Oysters and wine are served almost exclusively in the oyster growers' huts. It's a day of celebration and drinking, a true festival of the oyster.
These oysters are really incredible, with a little lemon, wine vinegar and shallots. Unbelievable.
C'est incroyable. Voilà.
I've been doing this since I was little. I live in the region. It's a tradition to come to the Oyster Festival every year.
The annual festival first came about during an especially difficult time for oyster growers, explains organiser and city official Rachel Datig.
In 2009, there was a crisis in the oyster and wine industries. We managed to bring these two struggling groups together here at the port, which was also not doing well at the time. The idea was to bring these land and sea-based experts together, to re-energize both. It's a partnership where all sides benefit.
But despite the exuberant atmosphere, it's clear that times are changing. There are fewer and fewer oyster farmers in Arcachon Bay.
We've gone from 1,000 growers to 300 in 30 years. Unless things change, in 10 years there'll be 100. No doubt.
What will it take to secure the future of oyster farming in Arcachon Bay, while also preserving the industry's traditions?
We need more solidarity in our profession and more regard for the environment, because we're so dependent on the natural environment. At some point, we need to be able to agree on measures that will allow us to continue practicing our profession and, above all, continue offering people a quality product.
Increased tourism, climate change, theft and growing competition. The challenges faced by the oyster farmers here are enormous.
We need more stability so that we can succeed, because this is a great job.
The future of the oyster farmers on Arcachon Bay is increasingly uncertain, but they're determined to preserve their tradition.